We are used to hearing cliche sayings like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger from people advising us what we should be doing or how we should be behaving at a particular point in our life. But these sayings, when said to a survivor of narcissistic abuse, re-victimize and invalidate them because their internal experiences do not match with the external expectations. They isolate and cause them further harm than any good, which is why I will expose 5 such re-victimizing sayings in this episode. Stay until the end. Hi, I am Danish, a narcissistic abuse recovery professional. In this episode, I will be exposing 5 re-victimizing sayings that invalidate survivors of narcissistic abuse. If that sounds empowering, subscribe to the channel by pressing the subscribe button and push the bell icon to stay updated with more content like this one. Let's get started, cut through the bullshit, and become more trauma informed. Number 1. Stop asking why they treated me like this and start asking why did I tolerate their behavior. Asking a survivor to look for the reasons why they stayed in the narcissistic relationship and went along with what happened is like asking a prisoner why they stayed in prison and kept on getting tortured. Leaving such a relationship isn't as simple as deciding to leave and then acting on their decision. Narcissistic abuse disconnects you from your capability to think clearly. You shut down, collapse, and lose access to executive functioning that enables logical and rational thinking and ultimately decision making. All of it happens because of the ongoing and never-ending exposure to the stress caused by the narcissist abuse. Doing basic things like taking care of your hygiene and remembering mundane things become difficult, let alone taking big decisions like leaving and facing the narcissist's rage. The truth is that experiencing narcissistic abuse traumatizes a person to their core and causes alteration in their brain and body functioning, in how they perceive the narcissist, the relationship, and their own capability to make the right decisions. The crippling doubt instilled by the narcissist through gaslighting makes them question their existence. They are paralyzed by the fear of losing their children, family, life, and finances or ending up alone. Nobody wants to tolerate abusive behavior, neither does anyone willingly stay in such relationships. We need to look beyond the surface and search for deeper and more solid explanations instead of reprimanding survivors and saying what feels good and easy. On the side note, it's very important to explore your childhood trauma related patterns like overcompensating and overgiving that contributed to your prolonged stay in the relationship, to work on your wounds. But blaming it all on you or the survivor and your past experiences is not the answer and absolutely not helpful at all. Number 2, you needed to meet this person and survive the abuse to come out stronger and wiser. No, you did not need to meet a narcissist, get abused and traumatized to fulfill some spiritual prophecy of self-realization. What doesn't break you doesn't always make you stronger. It leaves you with a chronic trauma that takes an eternity to heal from and get over. That coal and diamond analogy cannot be applied to every life situation. Pressure and adversity do not always yield progress. In fact, higher stress levels and exposure to ongoing adversity, especially during the formative years, are directly linked to the development of chronic and complex mental and physical health issues in adulthood. We cannot justify what happened to us based on why it needed to happen. We do not need to normalize suffering. You can have zero trauma history and still find meaning in your existence, still find your purpose and calling, and that too with ease. Acknowledge that we need to step out of our comfort zones and be stimulated by tolerable stress levels for optimal functioning and growth, but continuous adversity and chronic stress aren't necessary for your expansion. You need to understand that trauma does not help us expand. Quite the opposite, it constricts us and leaves us feeling debilitated. It leaves many people with lifelong health conditions such as multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, and other issues that nobody needs to have to become a better version of themselves. Number 3, it takes 2 to tango. Ever thought about what role you played in enabling their behavior? If someone asks you a question like this one and thinks in these terms, they have got it all wrong and do not understand the real dynamics of narcissistic abuse. They do not know what you're talking about or what you have been through. In a narcissist case, it doesn't take two to tango because they pretended to be someone else in the beginning and then with time changed into a completely different person, kept shape-shifting to prevent you from leaving, and finally left and threw you like a piece of trash. You were isolated from your friends and family to make you depend on them and them only. You were trauma bonded due to their inconsistent and hot and cold behavior. You experienced brain fog and cognitive dissonance because they showed you different sides at different times. You were psychologically forced to justify their abuse through gaslighting and chronic manipulation. You were taught not to trust yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, and your perception of the reality. You were called crazy when you tried to hold them accountable. How on earth is any of this your fault? You didn't ask them to abuse you. You didn't ask to get manipulated, gaslighted, brainwashed, and psychologically tortured. You didn't make them do this. It was their choice from beginning to the end. You need to understand that abuse is never a victim's fault. And this two to tango ideology does not apply here. Before we move to number 4, what sayings are you sick and tired of hearing? Drop your answers in the comments below and let's expose them as well. Number 4, your childhood traumas are the real cause of the problem. Saying this is indirectly telling someone you caused it yourself. Indeed, childhood traumas play a role in the relationships we choose and stay in, but contrary to the popular opinion, it does not cause us to keep choosing narcissists. Why? Because it's the narcissist who keeps looking for prey that has trauma-induced adaptive coping mechanisms such as fawning and over-complying to take advantage and weaponize these patterns against them. The real problem isn't your trauma. It is when you step in a relationship with a narcissist, these trauma patterns are activated because the narcissist treats you the same way your parents did. Simply put, it is the predatory nature of the narcissist responsible for all the harm that you experience in the relationship. Now, we need to know that we're not abdicating responsibility, but you can't take responsibility for things that you never did. I have worked with people with zero trauma history, and yet these people were severely abused by the narcissist. How would anyone explain that? Number 5. Stop complaining. Things happen to everyone and move on with your life now. I wonder if people would say the same thing to someone with a fractured arm or leg. If you break your arm, people will show sympathy unless it is a narcissist you're dealing with and ask you to rest and heal. Why? Because they can see the injury. But when it comes to psychological injuries, people lose all the compassion and understanding for you. We must understand that just because the injuries can't be seen and aren't physical does not mean they don't exist. Narcissistic abuse inflicts injuries to your brain, altering its structure, your body and soul that do not heal with time unless something is done about them. It isn't a typical breakup that happened and you're expected to leave it in the past and move on. Narcissistic abuse triggers all the typical diagnostic symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder and atypical symptoms such as cognitive dissonance. It leaves a person with a big moral wound that makes them question the very existence of the world, the people living in it, and the goodness in them. Healing and moving on cannot be forced. If you do not understand why someone is taking more time to move on than the timeline you have set for them, leave them alone because you do not get it. That was it for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful, and if you did, let me know in the comments and make sure to subscribe and share this video. I will talk with you in the next one. Till then, let the healing begin.